Hello and welcome to the Scottish Property Podcast. My name is Stephen Clark and I'm joined by my co-host as always, Nick Ponte. How you doing, Nick?
I'm fine, Stephen. Yeah, what are we on the sixth week of lockdown, I think.
Yeah, week 6 or 7, yeah.
How are you coping?
Good, mate, good. Back onto some DIY jobs, getting some, admin work done and some, trying to put some systems in place for the business once we come out of this lockdown. So yeah. What about yourself?
Yeah, good. I mean, to be honest with you, I'm really kind of ready to get back into things now, and I have been kind of like gradually doing a few more bits and pieces, work-wise, getting out to properties and stuff. Obviously practicing social distancing and make sure everybody's safe and that, but there's only so long we can go on, and hopefully, I think as we speak here, we're speaking on Thursday. Hopefully this weekend, I think Sunday, there's going to be some announcements by the government, hopefully easing things back in terms of businesses getting back to some sort of normality for certain sectors.
Yeah, I've been a little bit the same as well. The last week I've managed to start get the projects getting moving in Aberdeen again because B&Q opened back up, and I think Monday and Tuesday, Howdens, MKM, MGM, all these kind of timber merchants all kind of started to open back up. So the guys are now available to get on site. If the properties are empty, like you say, if you can practice social distancing and get them working on their own, then I don't see the problem. You're still following the guidelines, and obviously we'll wait for the next announcement. But it did look like Nicola Sturgeon was going to increase our lockdown for 3 weeks, even though Boris Johnson was under a bit of pressure to relax it. So it'll be interesting to see what comes this on. I think it's Sunday or Monday.
Yeah, I'll be raging at that, to be honest with you, because I just think there's no need for it. I think that it feels like she's just kind of doing it for sort of spite, just because she's probably just thinking, well, he's doing one thing, we'll do another sort of thing. I don't know. Anyway, let's not get involved in politics. But I saw on your Instagram today, Stephen, you were having a wee rant on Fife Council. What, you trying to get a skip or something like that? What was the story there?
Yeah, so I was using Fife Council for skips probably about 8 or 9 months ago on a project down here, and it was 175 quid plus VAT, I think it was. And I went on their website. I went looking to my normal supplier, and they were all sold out. So then I thought, I'll go to the Fife Council. Fife Council have got them. They're charging £315 for the same skip that was getting 8 months ago for 175 quid. I thought, you chancers. But the council have closed down all the the recycling centres. They've reduced their collections away as well, but it's okay. Their skip service is 100% operational. It says that on the website. We're 100% operational, and they're charging a huge markup on skips. That absolute
market
chances.
Forces, supply and demand. But that was interesting though, because there was somebody that posted on our Facebook group, Scottish Property Podcast Facebook group, early in the week. And they were at a bit of a standstill because they had a flat that was left to the tenants with loads of stuff, and they had to clear out carpets and all that. And they just literally couldn't get anybody to clear it out. And obviously the dump's been closed. That was one of the problems. But what I've done, actually, I just took on a new property. And what I did was I went round, I stripped out the carpets. Well, actually, my handyman went round and stripped out the carpets. What we did was we just put them out the back close for just now and just rolled them up neatly, put them out the back, and then we'll deal with them when the dump opens back up. So I think, obviously, if it's not too much stuff, then there's ways around it. But definitely, fly tipping's becoming an issue now as well. Because
it will do, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So the sooner we get that open, the better.
Right, mate, we're going to start with this week's topic. So this week we're going to discuss the 5 steps, and that's an action plan for dealing with rent arrears in this current situation. So this could be tips for, obviously, letting agents or self-managing landlords. Now, I don't consider myself a landlord. I consider myself an investor, and I do hand over all my properties to management agents, and sometimes I do get a lot of stick from other investors saying, why are you giving a chunk of your income away to a management agent? But right now, I believe that a good management agent in your power team has got to be the most important person right now. So they're going to be dealing with issues that you're going to actually raise. This is your expertise as a letting agent yourself, Nick. So I'd like to hit you with the fact you've got this 5-step process. You want to start going through it?
Yeah, well,
step by step, and I'll just chip in when I can.
I think, first of all, obviously, we need to mention that, like you say, a lot of people will use letting agents, and that is the job of a letting agent to basically chase rent arrears, and that's part of the process. But there will be a lot of people listening to our podcast as well who just maybe have 1-2 properties, or else to manage them themselves. So I think it will be useful, especially for self-managing landlords. And all, it's a time that we're at where this is obviously very relevant. There is a lot of people
Yeah.
struggling to pay rent, but this 5-step sort of process action plan that I've come up with, this can be used really at any point. So,
and I was going to actually say that. I was going to touch on that. This must be more critical than ever, because the government's obviously announced more measures during this lockdown period to give tenants more power, so you can't be evicted for rent arrears. So to have this action plan that you're talking about, it's got to be more important than ever, because tenants have got more power and they can abuse that power if need be.
Yeah, well, I think there was quite a lot of panic amongst landlords at the start because there was a lot of chat. The first thing that really got announced was that you could landlords and homeowners could apply for a mortgage holiday. Now, kind of landlords were worried that tenants got wind of this, and then they automatically assumed that, oh well, the landlord's not having to pay his mortgage, so we don't have to pay the rent. So I think a lot of people were quite scared that tenants were going to sort of abuse that and use it to their advantage, but it doesn't seem to have transpired that way. And speaking to a lot of other landlords and agents, now that we're kind of nearly 2 months down the line, we don't really have a huge amount of rent arrears. I mean, looking at my own lettings portfolio, I've got 89 properties now that I manage. And I was doing the figures the other day, and I think it's something like 7% of the rent roll is in rent arrears. So if you equate that to out of 89, basically I've got one tenant that hasn't managed to pay any rent at all. And I've got about 4 cases of tenants who have paid, say, 75 to 80% of the rent, and they're getting put on a payment plan to recoup those arrears. So I don't think it's as bad as what everybody was initially sort of making out.
Yeah. Thankfully for my own personal ones, my 5 portfolio, I've got 100% or 100% rent collected and paid and up to date. However, I've got just about the complete opposite in Aberdeen. 80% has got some kind of issue, either gave their notice to quit, can't pay any rent, or only pay 50% of the rent. So it's been quite a bit of a mixed bag for myself. But anyway, Nick, I'm going to let you crack on, mate. What is the number one step in your 5-step plan for dealing with rent arrears?
Okay, so I think that in normal circumstances, obviously you would be getting to the point where the rent was due for a tenant, and then you might notice that it's not come in, and then that's where you're kind of like, your collections process, your rent arrears process would kick in. But what's happened in this occasion with the COVID-19, the coronavirus, is that obviously it's kind of just basically crept up on everybody, and then all of a sudden we've been put in this lockdown situation. Businesses have had to close, and people have not been able to work and been put on furlough, etc. So basically it was really interesting, because what happened at the start was I was taking a lot of calls from tenants who were saying that they were either placed on furlough or they couldn't get out to work, and they were getting in touch with me. And they were saying, look, I don't know how we're going to pay rent. But I think it was like fear and panic. And I think it was just a reaction. And I think they just really wanted to know that basically, like, we were there for them. So people who, they didn't really know how they were going to be placed financially, they picked up the phone or they emailed. And my reaction was, look, let's just kind of like, don't worry, we'll get this sorted out, act with compassion. And I was just really wanting to, step number one, find out the circumstances, So, a lot of people didn't really know at the start what furloughing meant and how much they were entitled to. And then the government slowly started coming out with the information.
Let me ask you a question, Nick. If you've got a tenant that had some difficult circumstances, or said they've got difficult circumstances regarding their finances, are you asking for any proof to show that that is the case?
Yeah, well, exactly. So it's quite straightforward, because, like, say, for example, the tenants were, say, like, I had one set of tenants that worked in bars and restaurants, right? So they were like one of the first to close down. And obviously I knew they weren't like talking bullshit or anything, because all I had to do was go back in their referencing. And when I reference, I get an employer's reference, and it shows me that they were employed at a bar or restaurant. So I knew from the referencing that was obviously true. But, a couple of tenants that said that they were getting placed on furlough, but they didn't know when the money was coming through. And what I asked from them was proof from the employer some sort of email or some sort of form to say that they had been put on the furlough scheme and they were expecting the money to be paid. Because some employers with the furlough scheme couldn't pay their staff straight away. They had to wait for the money to come in at the end of April until they had the actual wages for their staff. So I wanted to know that the employer had put them on that furlough scheme and the money was expected to come in. So say they were due the rent on the halfway through April, but the money wasn't coming in till, and they hadn't been paid, but they were getting the money at the end of April, then I could say to the landlord, look, we're expecting this money to come in and you just have to wait a couple of weeks. So stuff like proof, asking for proof definitely is good.
So I'll throw a bit of devil's advocate in here. I spoke to one of my good friends who's a management agent who manages a couple of my properties in Fife, and he was kind of saying that he didn't want to rock the boat with asking for proof, because if you've got a tenant who's maybe sat in the property for 3 or 4 years, never missed a beat with rent, and all of a sudden you're now saying, okay, prove to me you're struggling, prove to me you've not, you've been furloughed, prove to me you've lost your job, whatever it may be, it might kind of, might cause a bit of a kind of get their back up, and if they know and they understand their rights and they know they can milk this for the next year before we can really legally get them out of the property, he thought that it was maybe best to try and play it quite amicably and take their word for it. And so I was wondering your point of view from that side of it.
Totally agree. And obviously you've got to look back and say you've had a tenant in for 8 years and they've never missed a rent payment and you've built up a relationship with them and you trust them, then obviously you might not go down those depths. But because I'm an agent and I need to act on the best interests of, my landlords, and I have to tick all the boxes, really, I've got to have a process there, because if it does all go wrong, then I can go back in my processes and say, well, look, I've got the proof there, I've got the paperwork. For me, it was more a checkbox exercise. But if you're a self-managing landlord and you do have that relationship with your tenant where you kind of it's been a long relationship and you trust them and the rent's come in on time for a long time, then, you need to take a judgment on it.
Yeah, brilliant. So that kind of covers your point one, Nick. What about step 2 on this 5-step process?
Sure. Just before we move on to step 2, Stephen, it was really interesting that a lot of those tenants that did call me up, right at the start, that were panicking, it was probably I would say probably 80 to 90% of those tenants actually paid the full rent. So the ones that came on the phone that was panicked, that said they were not going to be able to pay their rent, actually ended up paying the full rent. I think they just didn't. I think they just got fear kicked in at the start. Step number 2. Stephen, step number 2 is provide the tenant with information and links to government help. Now, this is something that I did quite early on because I wanted to show tenants that I cared and that I was willing to work with them. And, a lot of, if you look in the press and all that, and traditionally landlords have got a bad name because, they're just seen as these kind of money grabbing people, these that don't care for tenants and that. And there's a stereotype, isn't there? So I thought, you know what, I'm going to reach out to tenants, before any problems happen, and I'm going to show them that I'm going to be there to support them, because this is new to everybody, this COVID-19 coronavirus thing. And obviously, I think, to communicate with tenants and give them the right information, number one, it shows that you're on the ball and that you're not going to have any wool pulled over your eyes, because you know exactly what support is available to them. Number 2, obviously, it helps them get the right information so that they can act on it and get to the right help. So I was sending them emails saying, as the government were releasing the measures, likes of the furlough scheme, the self-employed, all these things, I was sending them links to the government website with all the information. I was also sending them links to, there's a website called Turn to Us, I think it's called. And it's really good for helping you find out what benefits you're entitled to. So for some tenants that weren't able to, there was a few people that weren't eligible for any of the government schemes, and they had to go on to universal credit, So universal credit could be a bit of a minefield for a lot of people. So giving them that resource for that website was really good. It helped them a lot. And also trying to help them onto universal credit as well at that stage definitely can help with obviously clawing back any rent arrears as well.
Yeah, so it's the the first couple of points, something I've noticed as well is you've kind of mentioned quite a few times that the communication between yourself and a tenant and communication between yourself and the landlord on the situations important. So that kind of takes us on to step 3, which you were mentioning about communication. You want to explain a little bit further about that?
Yeah, I just think in a crisis, I think, and when people start hitting, bad times in their life, they maybe always look to, somebody who they can take it out on or somebody who they can blame. But
Mm-hmm.
if you've reached out as a compassionate landlord or letting agent and you're trying to understand and work with people, then it's difficult for that tenant to kind of use you as the bad guy, if you know what I mean. So
Mm-hmm.
I think it almost gets them on side. And I think that's what I found with dealing with my tenants. I think that's why I've only got one tenant that's not paid rent. And even that one tenant that's not paid rent, it's not out of badness, by the way, because they've been a good tenant previously. It's just they just don't have the money. I think
Right,
they're a
just
genuine.
their individual situation.
I think there's a really genuine case, and they don't have. I've tried to help them get on the universal credit, and it's been difficult. And he's not motivated enough to get through the process and that, and I'm going to have to see if I can help them out a little bit more. But it's not due to badness. It's not due to, like you said before, getting savvy with what the rights are and then wanting
Mm-hmm.
to screw over the landlord. In fact, I don't think I've had any of that. Anybody wanting to screw over the landlord sort of carry on. But like I said, the communication's a huge thing. First of all, with the communication, I would say the best form is really over the phone, because people can sort of hear the tone in your voice that you're genuine.
Mm-hmm.
And then you kind of get them on side, and that you hear emotion as well, because if you're just texting, you don't really get a sense of the emotion, what pain
Yeah, things
points.
can get miscommunicated through text or emails,
Yeah,
can't it? Mm-hmm.
miscommunicated, exactly. So the first point of touch, really, I would say, is a telephone conversation. Then once you kind of establish the circumstances and how you're going to move forward, then I would always follow up with email communication, because you really need to keep an audit, a track record of
Mm-hmm.
everything that's been said between you and the tenant, because things could get miscommunicated further down the line if it doesn't all pan out in a good way. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, and you need to try and take them to the tribunal to get them out of the property and stuff.
Yeah, so exactly, and it's definitely the written form and the email is really the other thing you could do is WhatsApp. WhatsApp messages are quite good, because you can actually download the whole uh, like transcript of
All right.
the whole conversation. It gives you dates and time of each message that's gone. But the problem with the WhatsApp groups is obviously people can go back and delete messages as well. Do you know what I mean? And
All right, right.
delete their own messages.
Nice, mate. So step number 4, do you want to talk us through that?
Step number 4 is, after you've discussed, obviously, you've discussed what the circumstances are and what the problem is, and you've identified the problem. Sometimes it might be a case of just holding on and being patient. A couple of tenants, it was just a case of holding on a couple of weeks until the money came through on the furlough payments, and then they were able to pay the rent. So they were just, in effect, a couple of weeks late. But some of them, probably about 4, I think. I've got 4 that are sitting in arrears, and they are, one's self-employed, another one's got like another family member that they've had to help out. So they've had to look out for somebody else, and that's left them short. So what you have to do is you have to reach an agreement with the tenant, and at this stage they need to know that, okay, you can't pay your full rent. We'll speak to the landlord, or if you're the landlord, you make the decision. You can obviously choose a couple of things. Like some landlords, you hear them doing amazing things, and they're actually giving tenants like a rent break. Now, obviously, that's up to each individual landlord. If you've, like I said before, if you've had a tenant in there for 8 years and they've never missed a payment, then you might decide that you want to give them a couple of months off, right? But obviously, a lot of us are trying to run a business here as well, and that is our income. Like yourself, Stephen, your properties are
Mhm.
your income. You need
Yeah,
that to
yeah,
live.
sure.
You need that to live. So it's important that the tenant knows at this stage that, okay, you can't pay your full rent, but this rent needs to be paid eventually. So we need to set up a payment plan and a plan for moving forward.
So can the landlord object to this payment plan? Like, just say, for instance, you're in a couple of months of arrears, and if that couple of months could be £1,000, if you're only paying it back at minimal amount, 50 quid, I mean, that's taken a couple of years almost to get back. Could the landlord object or ask for more, or is it completely up to the tenant's discretion of how much they can pay?
Well, they could do. I mean, usually, it's landlords. I would say in this circumstance, really, it's got to be people have got to work together, because what's happened is the government have stepped in and basically said that there's going to be no rent arrears evictions now for 6 months, and they've changed the law. So before you could evict a tenant based on rent arrears, you would give them 28 days notice. If they didn't leave the property after 28 days and they just stayed in the property and didn't pay rent, then you would have to apply to the first tier tribunal for an eviction. But they would need to be in 3 months rent arrears, right? But now the Scottish Government have put through a law to say that they now need to be in 6 months. So this is where landlords don't really have a choice. They've got to work with the tenant, and they can't go in, all guns blazing, saying they're going for a full eviction, because, to be quite
Legally, they
honest,
can't.
it's just not going to happen. And let's face it, the first tier tribunal are going to have a big backlog. And if you do go down that route, then you could be looking at 9 to 12 months before you get the tenant out. That's why I think it's best that you get some amount of rent, even if it's like half the rent coming in just now, and you try and claw back the rest later. Because if you do fall out with the tenant, then they are going to look at their rights, and they're going to say, well, no, fuck you, landlord. I'm not paying anything. You can't get me out anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So the agreement is really important, and the payment plan, whether it be once they get back on their feet or once they're allowed back out to work, it could be the rent plus an extra £100 a month. But this is why it's so important that we need to get back to working again, because the longer it goes on, the worse these arrears are going to accrue for these people that can't pay the full rent, and the longer it's going to take for a landlord to get the money back,
And this kind of goes on to your step 5 in this process, which is kind of managing the debt recovery and clawing back what the tenant is due to the landlord. Is that right?
Well, yeah, this is obviously the final step, and you've got to be careful, because once you've set that plan up and you've sent that in writing and the tenant agrees to it, then really you don't want to be, phoning them every week, seeing how their situation is, because they've agreed to that. And you just need to kind of sit back now and make sure that on the next month, then the rent comes in and the payment's made. What I would really advise to do is, at this stage, is keep a track of a rent log, so statements showing all the payments, because that's really important to obviously keep your a record of what's coming in and how much arrears they've got left, and keep that communicated to the landlord keep that communicated to the tenant each month. And where you don't want to where you've got to watch is you don't want to become across as being like harassing. So that's why I say, look, don't be phoning them every week. Just catch up with them on the actual rent due date, or a couple of days before the rent's due. Drop them a text or a call, just see how everything is. But it's, like I said, it's really important to get the statements, because the statements, if it does go bad and you do have to go to the tribunal for eviction, then they're going to ask to see tenant rent statements. That's one of the things you really need to have. Yeah.
Could you do me a favour and round that up for the people who's listening? Because I think that's phenomenal value especially for investors that are actually self-managing, because they might be struggling a lot about it right now. And I think a mistake for myself managing landlord right now could be quite costly. So would you be able to round up your 5 steps one after another, if that's okay?
Yeah, sure. So number one, you find out the circumstances. Everybody's in a different sort of situation. So just establish, first of all, what is the problem and how it can be resolved, and that gives you a clear picture of how to get a solution to it. Number 2 is provide the tenant with some information and come across as trying to help them, rather than sitting back. I have heard a lot of landlords just saying, well, we've not contacted tenant because it's going to, we just want to sit back and wait for the rent to come in. I just think that you've got more chance of building up a better relationship with the tenant if you contact them before and show that you're actually caring about them. Number 3 is keep a record of all communications, absolutely vital. So don't just go on the phone and come to some sort of agreement. Make sure it's all in an email trail and you've got that saved somewhere. Number 4 is reach an agreement with the tenant and effectively a payment plan moving forward, which obviously the tenant's got to keep to claw back the arrears. Number 5 is the final point, and that is manage the debt recovery process without being harassing and without being pressurising the tenants. So basically keeping a record of all rent statements, because if it does go bad, then that's going to be your fallback and that's going to be your proof if you have to go down the route of an eviction.
Superb, Nick. I'm sure the listeners will take phenomenal value from that. That was a great roundup there.
Just a couple of points.
This time.
Sorry, Steve. Just a couple of points at the end to finish off with. Obviously, we're in this situation where the majority of tenants who do fall into rent arrears are not going to be there because really of their own doing. It's obviously because of the situation we're in. But, you know, if this does happen to you in the future and you're listening back on this and we're out of COVID-19, out of coronavirus, then really you need to look back at your referencing to make sure you're mitigating any chances of any bad tenants and tenants that don't pay rent. This is aside from the coronavirus. This is just on general rent arrears. And I think a lot of landlords experience bad tenants who don't pay rent because they haven't done their initial checks right at the start and they've not carried out good referencing procedures, right? So we could do another podcast on just referencing procedures, but that is vital to getting a good tenant in the future. And then also, if you are worried moving forward, like a lot of landlords will be really shaken up by this if they've got tenants that are not paying, and they'll be like, oh my God, is this really something I want to do? Buy-to-let property investing? Like, this is terrible. Then there are insurance policies out there that you can get, rent guarantee insurance policies, and they're still actually issuing them. Certain companies are still doing, the price of them has actually gone up, but you can still get them. So that's something you might want to consider as well.
Would that policy cover the current situation?
Yes. So yeah. So the policies that were taken out before this happened are obviously still paying out, and obviously they've come up with new ones which are more expensive, slightly more expensive, which will cover future pandemics as well.
Brilliant. Super, Nick. Appreciate that. That kind of rounds up the podcast and the steps that you wanted to give to the listeners. So just before we finish up, I'm going to read a quick review out. So thanks very much to the guys that are leaving us reviews on the podcast. And if you could leave us a review and subscribe, that would certainly help us get the podcast out there further. So this review comes from Jamie McCready. Jamie McCready's been on our Monday night calls quite a lot, Nick. He's always asking questions. He's engaging, really nice guy. So Jamie McCready says, just started my property journey and have came across plenty of great property podcasts, the Property Hub, Property Magic, to name a couple, but most I found were centred on the English and Welsh market. It was great to finally see that Stephen and Nick had started one based in the Scottish market, and both their insights, knowledge, expertise, and some decent patter thrown in is always a brilliant listen. Not only the podcast, but they have also created a community through the Facebook group, their Instagram updates, and their regular Zoom calls that gets everyone engaged and involved. And I've actually found myself connecting with like-minded people, starting on a similar journey myself, which is very inspiring. Cheers for the great content, lads. Would definitely recommend it. 5-star review. So thank you very much, Jamie, for that.
Oh, man, Jamie, that's lovely. It brought a tear to my eye there. See, when somebody goes to the effort of actually writing that amount, usually if I'm asked to leave a review, it's like 2 words. Do you know what I mean?
But great podcast, thanks.
Yeah, that was really spot on, Jamie. We're going to need to look out for him in the future and try and help him.
I'm sure he'll jump on the Zoom call on Monday. In fact, speaking of which, Nick, what's the plan for Monday for the Zoom call?
Yes, so we're continuing with our COVID-19 property response calls on the Monday night. They've been really popular. We've had a load of professionals on, from solicitors, mortgage broker, accountant. We had an estate agent and a surveyor on last week. But I think what we'll do for this week, Stephen, is I think we'll sort of do a post sort of lockdown, how to get back involved in property after lockdown, because it does feel like we're gradually getting there. So maybe I kind of investing in property after lockdown and how that's going to look and what you should be looking for, and give people a bit of motivation to get back out there into the market. What do you think?
Sounds good. Sounds good. Looking forward to it. Right, guys. So that rounds up this week's podcast. Please join us on Monday night for our Zoom call. Click on Ask to Request to join the Facebook group, and you'll see all the updates on that, or connect myself and Nick on social media, Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn, and you'll see the posts we post up regarding these Zoom calls. So thanks very much for listening. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. Bye for now.